Welcome back to the Wet Dreams podcast. We thank you for listening, and hopefully you've gotten some of our other episodes. But my name is Jose Gonzalez. I'm a mental health therapist and a sex therapist, as you may know by now. And I work primarily with out-of-control sexual behavior. And this is...
I'm Dr. Brad Hinman. I also work primarily with out-of-control sexual behavior in men. And so, yeah, we're both sex therapists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And today we're talking about sexual communication. Sexual communication. Let me say that clearer.
Yeah.
So, you know, a lot of our podcast is specifically focused for guys, while not everyone can listen to them, of course, or partners. But this topic has to do with guys and their partners. So the big things are like being able to ask for sex. How do you do that? You know, how to receive feedback from your partner about what you're doing sexually or otherwise, or those kind of things. I think guys that we see have a hard time expressing their needs and asking for what they need, both sexually and otherwise. But today we're going to focus a little bit on specifically sexually and or all those things related to having sex with their partners before and during, and I suppose after. I don't know. But but we're going to start wide lens kind of deal. Like, and it's funny that I have to ask this, but I'm going to ask it because there's a reason. So what is sex? What is your definition of sex is the question.
That's a big answer. That's a big question. So sex, the first thing that people think of, I think, when we say sex is sexual intercourse, or sexual penetration, right? Of the penis to something else. But sex really is a broad term. It can include anything. For those of us that are old enough to remember Bill Clinton, and he had oral sex with Monica Lewinsky, and he insisted over and over and over again that he did not have sex with that woman, right? Mm-hmm. But oral sex is a subdivision of sex. It's a part of sex. It is a sexual act, right? So what I'm trying to say is oral sex is included under the sex umbrella. Even fondling, digital penetration would be considered under the sexual umbrella as well. Even some would say kissing and fondling and caressing is under the sexual umbrella. Mm-hmm. So sex is one of those words that and when I say umbrella, it just means like it encompasses a lot of different acts, right? Intercourse or penetration being one of those things. And so we use sex to refer to penetration, but we also use sex to include all of these other sexual type acts. Mm-hmm,
mm-hmm. Right, and we use it interchangeably with intercourse often, especially in media and just in society in general. Why is it important to distinguish that, you think?
Well, because legally, right? So there's so it's an important distinction for legal purposes because if you're perpetrating sexual acts, which hopefully none of us are, if we're perpetrating sexual acts such as sexual assault and stuff like that, it's a worse count if there's penetration, right? If there's digital, oral, or penile penetration. And so, but some could argue, and I tend to agree with those people, that that's not sex, right? That's violence. And so, but that was the first thing that came to my mind.
Right.
If you said why the differentiation. But also, like, that people can't get pregnant from things other than the vaginal penetration. I suppose there's scientific methods now, you know, like artificial insemination and all that kind of stuff like that, fertility treatments. But so pregnancy is another distinction why we want to distinguish. And so there's also people think that you can't get sex STIs from like oral sex and digital penetration and stuff like that, mutual masturbation, but you can. And so, you know, I just think that in precision, it's another like why we need to be make that differentiation is precision of language to be sure like what we're talking about. Because when I have clients come in and they'll talk about doing some sort of sexual act, and they use these euphemisms, they're like, oh, hooked up
Did
is
it.
probably, we did it. We hung out. And so a lot of times I'll ask, like, so what are we talking about here? Like, what does that mean? Right. And so I'm assuming you're not doing the dishes while you're hanging out, right?
Right.
You're doing something else, right? So let's figure out what we're talking about.
Right.
So clarification, I suppose, is another reason.
Right. Well, I think vagueness gets us into trouble, honestly, in all aspects. I mean, the thought that came to mind was the how often guys base their performance, sex equals penetration and ejaculation. So then if that isn't present in a sexual encounter, then it was a total failure or whatever. So it's the vague, if we're not using precise language and broadening our idea of what sex is and encompasses all these things, then when it's not present, or when you don't have an erection, then it's a terrible experience, and it's horrible, and you're the worst partner and lover ever, Yep.
Mm-hmm. So that's another like you said, penetration, ejaculation earlier. So erection, penetration, and ejaculation, right? In that order, right? We want, and so, men tend to have this all or nothing mindset, right? Like we want a rock hard erection, we want penetration when it's time for penetration, and then we want ejaculation. And if any one of those things doesn't happen the way we want it to happen, we kind of throw the whole thing out, right? And sex tends to stop when one of those things doesn't happen. And we'll talk about that today, hopefully.
Definitely.
If those three things don't happen in that order, and to the intensity that we want it to, like what else can we do and what can be done about that?
Right. So let's go there. What are some things that our guys often have trouble with when it comes to sexual experiences, whether it's with their partner or whatever? Mainly partnered sexual experiences. What are some things that you see?
Lots.
Yeah. Same.
Like problems with erection is a common thing, and it's not just among older men, right? I've had lots of clients in their 20s with erectile dysfunction. And erectile dysfunction just means some sort of problem with erections, right? So some guys get an erection and then they lose half of their erection when they're trying to do sexual intercourse. But some guys don't get an erection at all, or they can get an erection, but it's not to the level that they want it to be. So those are kind of three different types of erectile dysfunction, or ED for short. But ED also means eating disorder, so it always confuses me. And so there's problems with erections, but there's also premature ejaculation. So that would be ejaculating too soon, or in less time than you want it to be. And so I think the stats are like 60 to 90 seconds. That if it's less than 60 to 90 seconds, then it can be classified as premature ejaculation. Although I'm not sure during partnered sex that even 90 seconds is enough. Long enough for you and your partner to really enjoy that. So premature ejaculation, erectile dysfunction. I'm seeing some clients with low or no sexual desire at all, so it's hard to get an erection when you don't have sexual desire. And so those are a lot of the kinds of clients that I'm seeing now.
Well, I think that again that speaks back to the having a narrow kind of definition of what sex should look like before, during, and after. But the desire piece, like we're told as men that we're supposed to have this strong desire, and when sex is presented to us, you're not going to say no. You can't say no, and not only you can't say no, but you have to perform, quote unquote, and have the erection to be strong enough to penetrate and maintain throughout the sexual encounter, which that's not necessarily realistic. That you're rock hard for 40 minutes, for example, continuously, especially without stimulation or anything like that. So I think it all, in my mind, goes back to that narrow view of what sex is, because if say you have an erection during oral sex, but then you lose it in between oral and then penetration, I've had clients that then they feel terrible about that, like, oh, that's so bad, I was supposed to keep my erection throughout that time. It's because of that narrow idea of what you think sex is supposed to be.
Right. And I think that some of that has to do with the way men masturbate. That because I tell men, you're masturbating incorrectly. That always gets their attention when I say that. And the reason I say that is because when men masturbate, we tend to masturbate in the same position, using the same hand, using the same materials, like we do. We're
same
habitual,
pressure,
right? Yeah, same pressure, same position. Our hands in the same position on the penis. So there's a lot of sameness, right? There's a lot of habitual activity. But during partnered sex, we tend to change positions, right? We have to stop to put on a condom, or we have to change positions because our elbows gets tired, or there's just a lot of changing. And so that's one thing that I teach men: when you're masturbating, stop partway through, change positions, or even put on a condom, right? And then finish masturbating, because you're practicing then maintaining your erection while you're changing activities, right? Or changing positions or changing whatever. And so I think sometimes that's why, barring like medical issues and stuff like that to make men lose their erections, I think part of it is we're habitually doing it incorrectly, or it's not analogous to sexual intercourse, our masturbation practices. And so if we teach them to change, like I said, change positions, or change pressure, or change hands, or sometimes I'm like, if you're masturbating laying down, stand up and finish, right? Stand up partway through and finish, because it'll teach your body and your brain to maintain that erection even though things are changing, because that's more like what happens during sex.
Right. Or changing the sensation, whether that's stopping masturbating, or changing how much pressure. If it's not your full palm, maybe it's just a couple fingers, or then you stop. Like it's you're like mirroring that up and down, because that's the tendency when guys masturbate. It's pretty linear.
Yeah, like
you get aroused, you start touching yourself, and then you're ejaculating. Essentially that's what it feels like A, B, but that's not really how sex is. It's this up and down kind of, you hear the kids crying, and then you get interrupted or something, or you hear a noise and you stop, or like you said, changing positions or whatever, it's more of an up and down kind of experience. But I think that also speaks to kind of the brain of men. Like, it's pretty like you find the thing that works and you just do that forever. You know what I mean? Like,
and that's a problem sometimes. It can be problematic, that because men tend to latch on to if that worked and if it was enjoyment. There was a book that I read years ago that it talked about that if it's male-female sex and if a female groans or makes some pleasurable noise, that the guy's going to do that now. He's going to do that the same way for the next 40 years, right? Because it made her moan. And so, men tend to be linear and habitual, and kind of formulaic.
Well, then I also think, I feel like that touches on our overall thing too, but I think that's also the case with their partners other than sex. For example, like, you'll give your partner a shoulder rub the one time and that led to sex. So now in our brains, our men's brains, to get sex, I do a shoulder rub, and then I'm gonna get sex the next time, every time, or I send this sweet text, and they're like, oh, that was very sweet, whatever. Like, okay, I'm gonna do that every time. Like, so it's that, I think it comes into this idea of sexual communication as well, like expanding the formula. I think it's like the theme, both sexually and otherwise,
Right. And I think sexual communication is important. I think that couples don't, in my opinion, from the couples that I've seen, that they don't communicate about sex enough, right? There's not enough sex talk in relationships. And what I mean by that is how do you ask for sex, right? Like sometimes guys will walk by, their partner, and they'll slap them on the butt, or they'll grab their breasts, and that's not, I suppose that's a form of sexual communication, right. But perhaps it would be better if we used our words, right? And asked nicely. And so we just don't. There's just been so many times where I've asked either males or females, like, did you talk to your partner about that? And the answer is like, no. And not only do they say no, but their like eyes get like really big, and they get this look on their face like, why would I ever talk to them about that? Well, because it's something that you want, or it's something that you desire, or something that you are thinking about, or something that you need, and we just don't talk about it. I think that couples need to talk more about things that they need, not less. I think we need to do more of that. Sex is often part of relationships, and so why would we not be talking about it? Right? We talk about where you want to go to eat, and we talk about what are we going to buy at the grocery store. Why don't we talk about what we want in bed? But we don't. There's this. It's taboo, so it's dirty and it's wrong, right? Like this, all these myths, and it's not any of those things. But that's the acculturation that we receive, and so we don't end up talking to our partners about it, which makes then the partner have to read your mind, and then nobody's a good mind reader, and so then we get in trouble.
Right. And then there's hurt feelings because what the person did while reading your mind wasn't the right thing, or something, or even triggered trauma. I mean, that's another aspect of it, that if you're not talking about it, and those experiences happen where someone gets triggered in the experience as well, that definitely happens.
Yeah, because going back to your shoulder rub thing, right, where somebody might say, well, I rubbed your shoulders, or they don't say it because they don't talk about sex, but the person might think, well, I gave you a really good shoulder rub and I didn't get sex afterwards, so that means you must be mad at me, or you must hate me, or you must want a divorce because it worked before and now it's not working. But there was never any communication. The person receiving the shoulder rub might have been like, wow, that's a really good shoulder rub. Now I can go back to work because my shoulders don't hurt anymore. Right. And so, but the other person that gave the shoulder rub gave it for sex. And so they're like, oh, I'm so confused, but they do all that in their head. There's no communication. And so, it'd be great if we set it up ahead of time. Like, I'm really in the mood for sex. And so, to help you get in the mood, can I give you a shoulder rub? And then maybe I'll ask you afterwards if you're in the mood for sex. And so wouldn't that be better than expecting your partner to read your mind, and then when they don't, then they're in trouble. And then now both of you are upset, right? You're upset because you gave a wonderful shoulder rub and you're not getting sex. But then your partner's upset because you're upset with them and they don't even know why. And then when they know why, you didn't ask. And so they were supposed to read your mind. And so, so now both people are upset.
Well, and then now every time you give a shoulder rub, then the partner's on edge. Like, okay, this has to mean sex. And I don't want a shoulder rub. Now we're not touching each other.
And then there's no touch, right? Yeah. So that's something that when sex is removed from I would say on the table, and then people are thinking we're talking about having sex on tables,
not actually having sex,
right?
Which is fine too, which is cool.
Yeah, that's fine if that's what you want to do. So when sex is not an option, right? Or like we were talking about earlier, if the male loses the erection, either partway through or didn't get a hard enough erection for penetration to occur, often what happens with couples is all touch stops.
Mm-hmm.
All physical touch stops. And then you kind of go off in a huff and watch TV or something. And so what I tell to couples is, when that happens, continue to cuddle, right? Continue to rub each other's backs or draw on each other's backs, or hold hands, or kiss, right? Or rub each other's hair. Still maintain physical touch even though sex is not happening, because that also is a form of sexual communication. Often, if we talk about the 5 love languages, right? Often you can go to the number 5lovelanguages.com. That is a religious website created by a pastor, but I've found some benefit from having my clients pursue the 5 love languages and figuring out which one they are. But anyway, so of the 5 love languages, often male's highest is physical touch and words of affirmation. Those are number 1 and number 2, or words of affirmation might be number 1 and physical touch might be number 2. But often, and they can have any number of the 5, but as their number 1, and it doesn't have to be those 2 that I just mentioned. But often with the people that I see, that's their top 2 love languages. And so you're still getting physical touch from cuddling, even though you're not getting sex, right? I think a lot of times people want sex because there's physical touch involved in that. So now the listeners will be like, no, yeah, I want physical touch. I want sex because it's sex, not because it's physical touch. And that might be, that's fine. But if you're not going to get sex, would it be better to be angry and sitting on the couch by yourself watching TV, or would it be better to cuddle, right, with your partner? And so, because you're still receiving love that way, right? You're still getting your love tank filled up, or whatever kind of analogy that we want to use. You're still feeling and expressing love, right? So that also is part of sexual communication, because it takes the pressure off. It takes the we have to do this. We have to get this done and get it done right now and right away and in this order.
Right.
And it kind of takes all that off. That we can still enjoy each other's bodies, and we can still enjoy each other's company, even though we're not having sex this time.
Well, and the bonus, obviously, not as something you should expect every time, but I feel like the bonus to that is, in that environment, is still potential. There's still the potential to eventually move that to a sexual place or have sexual contact after that. It's more of a potential than you guys sitting on the opposite ends of the sofa. You know what I mean? So you still may be able to get what you want, if you will, like through that, without the pressure of needing to have sex in that moment, but it still may lead you to that.
Absolutely. I think that happens a lot.
It happens a lot. Yeah. Like any time. I mean, you've talked about like plenty of times, and that's happened to me too, like where you tell your clients, tell your couples, like, okay, we're doing this exercise, but you're not allowed to have sex. And like, how many, I don't even know what the percentage is, but I'm sure it's a high percentage of people who actually end up having sex in those interactions, Yeah,
they come back looking all guilty. And I'm like, what happened? We had sex. That's okay.
Right. Exactly. Because it's that pressure. The pressure is removed. The expectations are removed or whatever from that interaction. It's just cuddling. It's just touching each other. There's no expectations of what happens. And I mean, that's why often couples will go on a vacation. You've removed all these barriers and these expectations, and you end up having great sex in the vacation, because there's those hang-ups, whatever, those breaks, if you will, to quote Emily Nagoski, those breaks are gone.
Yeah. Emily Nagoski is another great author for you to look up.
She's a legend.
But it's true. Like, it's when we take the pressure off, because some partners will complain that's the only time he touches me is when he wants sex, right? So that person is not getting their love language met, and then the person doing the touching or the grabbing or the slapping as they walk by, they're not gonna get sex in that situation because their partner's turned off because of the grabbing or the slapping or the touching or whatever. I'm talking like the drive-by,
drive-by butt squeeze,
right? And so, but wouldn't it be better if we just cuddled for 15 minutes? 15 minutes is my always go-to time frame. So if we cuddled for 15 minutes without the expectation of sex, sometimes then we allow ourselves to get turned on because there's no pressure. There is no pressure to have sex. And so then sometimes sex happens kind of spontaneously because it grows out of that mutual connection and that bonding time.
So why do you think guys defer, I think it's a two-part thing. You defer to those butt grabs and boob grabs, whatever, instead of asking for what they want. So why is it hard specifically for guys to ask for what they want in an effective way other than those kind of things, It's another big question.
It is another big question. As I take a deep breath. I think there's several reasons for it. Number one, men tend to have less words than women do. And so when I say that to people, I always think like they're carrying a bag of words around and their bag is smaller. Men tend to use oral expression of language less frequently than women do. I suppose that's the more scientifically accurate way to say it. And so that's one thing. So just men express themselves with words less frequently than women do. Another problem that's related, that's tangential, is that men are not acculturated to talk about emotions, right? And included in that, like something that I need is tied to the emotions, right? In emotions world. And so men tend to not talk about emotions. And they seem less capable of being able to express themselves emotionally, right? Because like when you want to have sex with somebody and you want to cuddle with them and you want to kind of be next to them, there's an element of vulnerability to that, and men don't like to be vulnerable.
Right. Well, it's the admission of. I mean, it's similar to when guys struggle with going to counseling. It's an admission of, I can't take care of myself or something. I can't fully take care of this. I need something from someone else. So that means that I'm not fully capable. I don't know what the exact word, but it's something about I'm weak. Yeah, I guess that would have been an easier way to say it. Yeah, well, I'm weak. Exactly.
That's what my clients tell me, right? Yep. They're like, why did it take so long for you to come to counseling? This problem has been happening for 12 years. Well, then because I'm weak if I come to counseling. And I could say lots of things about that, but probably the nicest thing I could say is that coming to therapy for an issue is the opposite of weak. It's very brave for people to pick up the phone, call a stranger, tell them that I need an appointment, come into that stranger's office and sit down and talk about their issues, and being willing to work on those issues and being able to do the interventions and the assignments that we give them to do. That's brave. Like that takes a lot of courage. And so, but men don't like to be vulnerable. Men don't like to be weak, right? Even though it's not weak, it's the opposite of weak. But but they don't. That somehow we've kind of put that label on these things, right?
Right.
That if you ask for help, that's why men don't ask for directions when we're driving somewhere, right?
Or anything at the grocery store.
Yes.
You find it yourself,
right? We don't want to ask anybody for help because we don't want to appear weak, right? And so. But what I tell my clients is, okay, you have a choice of being frustrated, thinking that asking for help with that is weak. So then you end up not getting it. So you're frustrated. Frustrated, angry, upset, sad, all of those things. Or you could ask your partner, you could communicate sexually with your partner, Or you could go to a sex therapist if it's a bigger problem that you need help on navigating. And admit that vulnerability and seek help and get the help and then be happy in your relationship, right? So you could be all of these negative emotions, or you could be these positive emotions.
Right. And get what you want ultimately.
Right. And get what you want. Yes, exactly.
For sure. Yeah, there's this like idea of self-sufficiency or something, like somehow if you don't have certain skills, you're lesser than or something. You can't. Yeah, it's just interesting, like message that guys go through, like you have to know everything. I mean, that's the whole reason we started this podcast. Like you're expected to know all things, and when you don't, then you're a lesser of a man, you know.
Yep.
But we don't apply that. Like it's just interesting. Like when it comes to sports, for example, when you see LeBron James on the court, you know in your heart and mind you're not as physically capable of them, but that doesn't frustrate you in the same way. Like I don't know, it's just I guess the bigger things I don't get it necessarily.
right we get and that's another thing, men tend to get frustrated easily. So for example, if the penis isn't working correctly, or if the butt grab didn't result in sex, we tend to get frustrated. Then we harbor that frustration, and then that turns to anger, sadness, like lots of other emotions as well. We tend to not talk about our emotions, not communicate about our emotions, but then they tend to, we harbor those, and then they fester, right? And they can get out of control that way as well. And so wouldn't it be better to talk about those so that we can get rid of them rather than letting them fester? But also we like what you said just a second ago, like we have to be experts at things without asking for help. And that's why porn is so prevalent, and which we talked about in another episode.
And we'll talk about it again in the next episode.
That men rely on porn because we, at whatever age that we start having sex, we have to be an expert at that. When we haven't done it before, right? Because notice I said when we start having sex, we have to be an expert. So when we start means we've not done it before. So all of a sudden we need the summary experience of all of society up until that point. And so people rely on porn for that, to learn how and where this goes and what we're supposed to do when we get it there, and all that kind of stuff during sex. And so we're relying on porn to be a teacher when it's not really supposed to be a teacher. It's entertainment, like any Hollywood movie, right? It's although we all know how to be Spider-Man from watching Spider-Man movies, I still can't shoot webs out of my wrist. Right? And so watching porn doesn't make us spectacular at sex, even though that's what many men who watch porn want it to do.
Definitely. So then that begs the question. So then how do, as men, what are some things, how do we ask for sex better? Honestly, that's the question. How can we ask our partners for sex better, in a better way?
There's just talk about it. Like I think talking about sex, talking about the frequency of sex that you would like, and I keep thinking, well, somebody's going to hear that and say, well, I want sex every day. I want sex 4 times a day. Like with, and that's fine if you do, but ask your partner how frequently they want sex, right? Because don't assume that your partner wants sex as frequently as you want sex, because we call that desire discrepancy when people want sex at different frequencies. And so desire discrepancy is also a very common reason couples come for couples therapy. And so just having that communication, asking each other, like, this is how often I would prefer sex. How often do you prefer sex? And then really you have to meet in the middle of that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so let me repeat.
Yep.
You have to meet in the
Yep.
middle. Like if you're wanting it 4 times a day and your partner wants it 4 times a month, then you're going to have to meet somewhere in the middle of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Between 120 and 4. Because 4 times a day for 30 days, right? So you're going to have
big
to
disparity.
yes, and you're gonna have to compromise, right?
Uh-huh.
And so because, and I want to make this clear as well, no one should have to have sex if they don't want to have sex, right? And I make that clear to my couples as well, that no one's talking about forcing you to have sex, and because that's not a thing either. Like let's not do that, because that's wrong and bad.
Exactly.
And so, but, if you want it 120 times a month and your partner wants it 4 times a month, if we compromise and say, can we have it 6 times a month? That's not anywhere as close to 120, but it's also not 4. Right? So if we increase it a little bit and then kind of stabilize that and get used to that, then maybe we can increase it to 10, right? And 10 times a month. And so, as with any negotiation, you're going to cater more towards the less frequent one, right? So like if you're selling your car and you want $10,000 and they offer you $1,000, you're probably going to cater more to try to get them to come up, right? Rather than you trying to lower. But I don't know. That was a weird analogy.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Nah, it makes sense.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we just want to communicate about that. Your question was, why do we not?
What are some ways that we can?
Thank you.
I got you. What are some ways that men can ask for sex in a better way? Yeah, it's communicating exactly what that looks like for you, or the ideal of frequency or whatever, like, and then finding that compromise.
I think another way that men can communicate about sex more frequently and in a better way is it's basically another form of negotiation, right? Like if your partner is more willing to have sex with you when you do household chores, right? So then be clear, like if I vacuum in the floor and take out the trash, would you be open to sex, right? So you just ask the question, you just use the words, right?
Right. Make the request.
Right. Make the request, right? And she or whoever your partner is can either approve or deny that request, right? Because we're not going to force people to have sex. But also, like, if they say no, then say, like, I would love it if people would say things like, that's okay, but help me know how, like what would it take, or how could I get you in a position where someday somehow you might want to have sex?
Right.
Not today, because you said no, or not right now at this minute, you've said no. But what do I need to do? How do I need to act? What do I need to say that would be more conducive to you being in the mood for sex?
Yeah, and I think that's like huge, because I think, part of it is how we receive feedback as men. I think, the big concepts in my mind is like the fear of rejection and the fear of vulnerability, and then getting that perceived rejection, because to a guy probably that feels like, oh, we're not having sex ever again, maybe, or even we're not having sex now the rest of this weekend or whatever. But that wasn't necessarily what the partner was saying. Like, that just means right now I don't want to have sex. So if you're receiving that feedback in a more open way, like, okay, there's this moment that you've said no, but like, how can we get there later today? How can we get there tomorrow? How can we get there this weekend? Whatever, like having that openness to not perceive that as a rejection, and it, of course, it can feel that way because you're being vulnerable and you're wanting to, connect with your partner. You're giving yourself to them, and then it feels like they're like just slapping it down. And, nope, I don't want that. You know what I mean?
Right,
I get it.
right.
But it's like trying to have that openness when their feedback is given back.
But sometimes I think we interpret things as rejection when it's not really rejection.
Yeah.
right? Like if your partner just comes home from working a 14-hour day and they haven't eaten anything and they haven't taken a shower and you grab their butt when they walk in the kitchen, like, and they say, no, I don't want to have sex right now. Is that really rejection?
Mm-hmm.
Or is that like you made that bid at a time when I could not satisfy it, right? Like,
it has nothing to do with them,
right?
As a person,
that's what I'm trying to say.
Individuals, yeah, exactly.
Right. It's like I would be exhausted, like whatever, right?
Yeah, yeah.
like if you asked me, I don't know, to plant a garden, like the answer would be no, because I just worked 14 hours and I hadn't had a shower and I'm exhausted.
You're gonna say no to most things,
right? So, but that's what I'm trying to say is that's not really rejection. It feels like rejection to us. But it's just you asked at the wrong time, right? And so if you said to the person, that's okay, just even saying that's okay, you're going to be more likely to have sex at some point in the future. But if you say, that's okay, how could I arrange circumstances so that they were different so you might be more willing to have sex? And they're like, let me take a shower. Let me sit down for 20 minutes with my feet up. Maybe rub my feet, right? Then maybe
right,
I might be in the mood for sex,
right.
So I think sometimes we label things as rejection when they're not really rejection. Like they're not saying, no, I never want to have sex with you because I don't like you. That's rejection.
Right, exactly. Well, I think it also comes back to the point earlier where you talked about how, I think you mentioned that, I don't know, maybe I'm making this up, but you talked about how it builds, or how men, we kind of internalize that. You didn't use those words, but it makes me think like if you've built this like feeling or disappointment for so long, and then now this is the one time you've chosen to make the bid or whatever, you've kind of built up this like frustration. So then that so much is at stake when you have this like this request from your partner, then that I feel like that could make it feel like rejection. Whereas if you're continually talking about it, continually having open communication with sex, then that's just another conversation that you've had, But if you're not having conversations, and then this is the one time you choose to make the bid, yeah, of course you're putting all your chips. You're like, right. I'm all in, Yeah. And then of course it feels like you've lost all your money, I suppose. But
and that's another thing. We kind of tend to awfulize stuff, right? We tend to think things are permanent, right? So if my partner said no on a Monday afternoon, we think that's going to be the answer 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, right? See how ridiculous that sounds?
Yep.
But that's what we do in our brain, right? We think, oh, I'm never going to get sex again because I'm awful, right?
Yeah.
When really it's you asked in the wrong way, in the wrong circumstances, and things were not conducive for sex at that minute, but they could be later. And I'm implying, so now I'll just say it blatantly, a lot of it depends on your reaction. Like when you're turned down for sex, when you're going to get sex again is dependent on your reaction to that no. Right? Like you need to kind of bolster your defenses and kind of build up that immunity and be able to be like, that's okay, right? That's all right. If you don't have sex with me, that's okay. I want to have sex, but I understand, right? That's so much more sexy than, and you huff away, you turn on the remote,
Yeah,
so where's my supper?
Give me a sandwich.
Right, yeah. Like which one of those is more likely for you to get sex in the future?
Yeah. And a side note, I think then it's important to have someone that you can say there's those feelings of rejection, whatever they're like, have someone that you can talk to about it, maybe another buddy of yours or your counselor or whatever, you know what I mean? Like stuff that up there, that's fine. And have a favorable reaction, and then go deal with it with your person, your trusted person, because his feelings are important. but the reaction is not going to get you what you want in that moment of being like, oh, fine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And hopefully, like, the person that you talk to is going to hold you accountable, right? Like, they're not just going to be like, yeah, well, that person's a jerk, you know. You know, hopefully they're going to be like, so they just got off a 14-hour shift, and you want sex, like, you know. So hopefully they can help us to think about ways that we could do things differently. I tell my clients all the time, like don't get ashamed of the things that I'm telling you. Think of it as cheat codes, right? Like, think of it as life hacks, right? That this is how you can survive better. This is how you can make it better the next time. You know? And so, like, we get attached to that no, and then we think of it as rejection, like we talked about. But then we think of it in terms of permanence, like, I'm always going to be rejected. So we don't think of it as, okay, so I lost a life. I'm thinking of video games.
Yeah,
I lost a life. What can I do differently next time to make it so I don't lose a life?
Right.
You know, I keep my energy level up. Right.
Exactly. Like, because we don't just, you don't play Mario and you lose a life and then you never play again. You, like, toss the controllers. I mean, I'm sure there's definitely frustrating times of when you do that. But the first time you lose in a level, are you throwing the whole console away and never touching it again? No.
Probably
Like,
not.
we don't do that with that.
Right.
But we do it in our relationships.
Right. Exactly.
Yep. So another, as we're wrapping up a little, but another suggestion that came to mind was, and I don't know if it's called that anywhere, but I think we like to call it the 12-hour sex rule. We're going to trademark that, copyright, hopefully. So, and you can explain some more, but the general premise that I understand it is, if you're wanting to have sex at 10 p.m. or 9 p.m., for example, because 10 is past my bedtime, but at 9 p.m., you're having to start at least at 9 a.m., 12 hours before the sexual interaction, and I'll let you expand a little bit more, but that's kind of the premise, right?
Yeah. It's that is it in a nutshell, right? So start 12 hours before, and it doesn't have to be 12 hours on the dot, right? Like, but often what I hear couples complain about is, you know, we've been fighting all day and we're getting ready for bed and he wants sex, right? And so it's because that's one of the things that a bed is for, right? So the man's like, bed, sex. And so all the fighting disappears for the man, right? And so that's what I tell a lot of the guys that I see, like, if you want sex at 10 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock at night, I don't care what time it is, you need to start 12 hours before. And they always get a really confused look on their face. And so I give them suggestions, right? One of the things that I say is send 3 different types of three different types of texts to your partner. One is a thank you text, right? So, thank you for getting up with me this morning while I was getting ready for work. That really meant a lot to me, right? And so that's the thank you one. The second one is similar to the first one, but it is different. The second one is appreciation. Like, what do you appreciate about your partner? A thank you is like, thank you for making me lunch, or
their behavior.
Yeah. Thank you for shoveling the sidewalk. That's a behavior. Appreciate is more a personality thing, right? I appreciate that you love animals, right? And then the third type of text to send during the day, during that 12 hours, is I'm looking forward to doing ABC with you, right? I'm looking forward to going on vacation with you this summer, or I'm looking forward to this weekend when we don't have to do anything, we just get to sit around and talk and spend time and hang out with each other.
Yep.
So I'm looking forward to whatever with you. Like I'm looking forward with you, because there's been research studies that show that when you make plans with your partner, there's this sense of permanence. Oh, he's not going anywhere because he's making plans with me.
Yeah.
Right. He doesn't. And then the third one is looking forward to something with your partner. And then I tell my people, spread those out, so 12 hours. So once every 4 hours, you're supposed to send a text. No, well, that wouldn't be, because you're not going to send one right before bed or whatever.
Right.
Anyway, you figure it out.
Yeah. Get your own schedule.
Get your own schedule. So every couple of hours, send your partner a text. And so sometimes my clients will say, I don't know what to say about the appreciation thing. I'm like, Google affirmations, Google appreciation phrases, and you'll get 1,000 of them. And I tell them, like, write them up ahead of time in the note section of your phone, copy and paste, put it in a text message and send it. Right.
Yep.
They're like, well, isn't that cheating? Well, it's better than not saying anything.
Right.
And it's better than grabbing her butt at 10 o'clock at night because you want to have sex and you haven't spoken to her. You haven't said a nice word to them all day. And now you want to have sex. Right. So it's better than that.
Exactly.
But sure, should it be spontaneous? Yes, that's great. But right now you're not doing anything.
Exactly. Well, that's the same argument that people have with scheduling sex. Like, we want it to be spontaneous though, but the reality of the current situation is that it barely ever happens. So let's start with scheduled. It's the same as that. Would you rather have nothing to happen, or would you rather have some forms of affirmation or some sex to happen on a scheduled time? Like, you choose which one's better.
Yep. I get that comment all the time. Like, schedule, it's so not romantic.
It's not sexy.
It doesn't count, right, if it's scheduled. Your birthday is scheduled and Christmas is scheduled every year. And you get gifts both those times.
Right. Doesn't make the gifts.
Do you throw those gifts away because it's scheduled? No. So it's an illogical argument.
Exactly.
Can you tell?
You got passionate about that one.
Because I hear it so often and I'm like, that is so ridiculous.
Definitely.
Breakfast is scheduled. We still eat it.
Right. And you still enjoy it the same.
It's like we schedule all kinds of things. We schedule our dental appointment. We probably don't enjoy that.
Yeah,
That's
not a good point. Take that one out. Yeah.
We schedule lots of things that we enjoy.
Yep. Well, but it's also using that thing that men have for their benefit, like the idea of structuring it, or the idea of, I've told guys, set a reminder on your phone, like, and then that'll say, text my wife. You know what I mean? Like, it still counts, and you're using that part in you that desires that structure, or desires whatever that makes it easy. A part of it is like making it convenient, but you still get the amount of points when your wife sees, when your partner, but we're talking about guys technically, when your partner sees, hey, I appreciate you for always learning. You're always pushing yourself to be the best mom that you can be. Whatever, like, that still counts. No matter what the behind the scenes action was going on.
Right. It does still count, and it matters, and it's going to get you into the habit of doing that yourself. Right.
Right.
So maybe you won't need a reminder if you keep consistently doing this with the reminders. After, who knows, a month or 6 weeks or so, you won't need those reminders anymore, because now you're into the habit, right? But to get into the habit, to create something where nothing existed before, sometimes reminders will help. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Right. Does it cheapen your workout experience because you put an alarm to wake up for the workout? That doesn't make sense.
Right.
You still worked out, you still got the endorphins, and you still took care of your body. Does it matter that it was scheduled, or does it matter that something told you to do it, quote unquote, whatever, you know?
I just set a reminder to buy spinach. Does that mean it doesn't count? Does the spinach feel left out, or, you know, because I had to remind myself to buy spinach?
Poor spinach.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah. So that's, I mean, all good suggestions, I think, and probably this is something we can continue to talk about and expand on some of the strategies. I know, you know, I mean, definitely myself as a guy, but I know a lot of guys like to have that, like, okay, what do I do? The things to do, you know what I mean? And maybe that's an episode we have to have. Here's all the suggestions that we've given throughout the years, you know, like, and you build your toolbox of things, you know. That definitely would be nice.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Is there anything else you wanted to add today on today's episode? Anything that come into mind?
No, I think we did it.
Yeah. We made it. It's definitely something that can be expounded on. We could talk, I mean, we could obviously talk for hours. But I think overall the theme for me in my mind is like expansion. Their scope that doesn't help, you know. So I think that's the word for today is expansion, you know what I mean? It's a quote, it's a Sesame Street, I don't know, but
Communicate,
yeah, definitely, for sure,
including about sex.
Sweet. All right. Thanks for listening, and, you know, obviously follow us on our socials, HinmanCounselingServices.com, on Facebook, same thing, same name. And check out all our socials, and we appreciate. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to DM them in any place or on our website. And we're definitely going to have future episodes with like answering questions and stuff as we get more questions in. So that should be fun. Cool. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Here's just a tip. Do you find it difficult to ask others, especially your partner, for what you need? Try this out. It's called sandwiching. You take the difficult thing you want to say, which is the meat in the sandwich, and add positive feedback on either side, which would be like the bread of the sandwich. So for example, babe, I really have appreciated how you have fulfilled a lot of my needs lately, and I thank you for that. I would also love some more sex and intimacy with you. Is there a way that we can improve that? I know you've been trying hard to be more mindful of that, and I truly love you for doing that. Sandwiching allows you to highlight some good things that are happening along with asking for some changes. Try it out and let us know down below how it went for you. The Wet Dreams podcast and any content posted is intended for general information, educational, and entertainment purposes only. We are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this podcast. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional, diagnosis, or treatment. Listeners should not disregard or delay in obtaining a medical advice for any medical or mental health condition they may have, and should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions.